Welcome to another edition of the Magic Latest podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. This is your host, Jalon Dixon, and we are in for another very interesting episode. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and try to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic podcasts here on the YouTube platform. So remember to hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And let's get right into it. Today is going to be a bit of a quicker episode with a focus on Jonathan Isaac and then answering the questions to back up shooting guard. Let's start with Jonathan Isaac. The minute issues are still a thing that we have to worry about coming into this season, despite all of the optimism around Jonathan Isaac wanting to play all 82 games and things of that nature. And more particularly, there's a question as to whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze. Let me explain. In an article by our good friends, the Orlando Magic Daily, shout out to them, they broke down a particular stretch with the Orlando Magic in the game against the Philadelphia 76ers that stood out to me in a real way. The article says the Magic pulled away in the final period of play, outscoring the Philadelphia 76ers 34 to 8, in which they dominated the game 128 to 98 behind strong play from Wendell Carter Jr., Tristan Da Silva, and Jace Richardson. Despite all the progress the Magic have made in retooling their roster, the uncertainty about Isaac's availability remains a huge question mark for this team. It says Jonathan Isaac finished tonight's game recording 3 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, and 1 block in just 8 minutes of play. Although the numbers aren't necessarily bad for limited action on the court, you shouldn't put much stock into it when you're playing the Sixers' deep bench late in the preseason game. Isaac didn't enter the game until the beginning of the fourth quarter when he got action playing at the 5 alongside Anthony Black, Jet Howard, Noah Penda, and Jace Richardson. One could make the argument that Jamal Mosley was experimenting with different lineups and wanted to give Jet Howard an opportunity coming into the game early on, which is fair. But looking at this on the surface level isn't the right thing to do, and his limited action on the court goes deeper than just the box score. The important part to all of this is the very last part of the article, actually, that kind of summarizes all of this. Not to mention, or let me pick up a paragraph before that. Anthony Black appears to be solidified as the sixth man off the bench. Mo Wagner, when he's healthy and returns to form, will be playing a lot. This is all without mentioning the fact that Goga Batazde, Tristan Da Silva, and Jace Richardson have all looked terrific in preseason. Not to mention that Isaac hasn't been able to consistently play more than 15 minutes a night, and with that expensive contract, the Magic should look to move on sooner rather than later. With the constant worry about Isaac's risk for injury, his inconsistent shooting, and the fact that the Magic have guys that contribute significantly more ahead of him on the depth chart, it's going to be hard for Isaac to find a legit role on this team moving forward. The collective of all of those things that I just read all push to that very last paragraph, being that if Jonathan Isaac is now losing out minutes, and again, it's the preseason, but if he is now losing out minutes to experimental lineups that include Jet Howard, who could barely find minutes on the floor last year, and Noah Penda coming in as a rookie, there's questions as to whether or not the issues around him being able to play significant minutes are now coming to roost. If he cannot play more than 15 minutes a game, if he cannot be consistent as a knockdown three-point shooter in that time frame, because his stretchability on the perimeter is something that was supposed to be a different element he brought to the table, separate from guys like Goga, separate from guys like to a lesser degree Mo Wagner as well. If he cannot do that and he's just the per minute defensive anchor, that puts them in a much more difficult situation, because Jonathan Isaac, being a high level rim defender, doesn't do much for you if he's a net negative offensively, shoots less than 45% from the field as a big man who primarily with his physical traits should be a good play finisher. And I believe his stats say that he shoots less than 26% from beyond the arc, despite the fact that his 3-point shot volume was like half of his shot chart. Jonathan Isaac is slowly but surely positioning himself with the depth that's been built out on this roster over the last 6 to 8 months to now possibly become a liability. There's a world where, again, we talked about it all summer, the idea of this team playing faster, right? And I don't think it's a coincidence that the lineup where he played in with Jet Howard, Anthony Black, and that group with Jace Richardson also being on the floor, it was a much smaller lineup with Jonathan Isaac at the five, is what I'm saying. This pace and space ideal that this team is trying to play with now is yet another philosophical change for this team that makes a guy like Jonathan Isaac expendable, because he's a guy that needs to be a high level play finisher, and he needs to be a guy that has to keep up with the pace of this team trying to play more actively. And if you're too worried about his injury concerns, he cannot adapt to this new offensive philosophy that this team's trying to implement. So everything points to a couple of things. Number one, this team is going to likely play much more small ball with guys like Mo Wagner and Goga Batadze occupying the backup center positions, already considered, but two guys that thrive in the open court in transition, showed a lot of that last season. Number two, Isaac is now has the possibility, because of the small ball lineups, to lose his minutes, not just to guys like Goga and Mo Wagner when healthy, but now to guys like Jet Howard, Jace Richardson, and Noah Penda as well. And then number three, with more emphasis on creating a more advanced offensive structure and not necessarily taking away from the defense, but understanding that the defense is what it is already and wanting to put more emphasis on building up the offense in the right direction, a guy like Jonathan Isaac, prioritizing him getting his little 15 minutes or less a game becomes a little bit less necessary. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jonathan Isaac is put in a interesting situation around the NBA trade deadline where he's kind of a salary cap dump. I wouldn't be surprised if you're not going to get any positive value for Jonathan Isaac. That's clear. But more particularly with the Orlando Magic being so close to the first apron, Jonathan Isaac is one of the most lucrative contracts on the roster that's worth trying to move ASAP. We'll actually get to why that matters a little bit later on, but Jonathan Isaac is easily the most movable guy as far as what the Orlando Magic should want to do on this roster right now. Like if there was anybody that should be priority number one to get off of their contract this season, it should be Jonathan Isaac. Let's move on to the shooting guard conversation. And backup shooting guard is pretty interesting right now, right? When you look at the Orlando Magic, there's a few things that are already set in stone. The Orlando Magic starting five is set. Jalen Suggs, Desmond Bane, Franz Wagner, Paulo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr. Backup point guard feels like it's pretty much solidified by Tyus Jones. That feels like an automatic gimme. That's set. Tristan Da Silva as the backup wing at the 3 spot feels set. So we have 7 guys in the rotation that have their minutes pretty much deadlocked at where they should be. But backup shooting guard is an interesting one. Anthony Black is in a position as a year 3 guard with the physical tools that he has and the ability to guard on both sides to fit really well next to Tyus Jones. If we're talking particularly about running out a completely different second man unit and not staggering them with guys like Franz, Paulo, Desmond, so on and so forth. If we're talking about just running out a complete bench lineup unit with a traditional shooting guard next to Tyus Jones in the rotation, he fits the best next to Tyus Jones as a perimeter defender that can take on the hardest assignment on those bench units and still provide wing versatility, a guy that you can give the ball to in transition, a guy that you can give the ball to in situations to initiate offense that can create open shots for guys like Tyus Jones. And he has enough on-ball reps within this system already, or within this Orlando Magic system as it is, that when they now entrust him with even more on-ball duties, he should be able to fulfill that. And we're already seeing strides of that in the preseason. The question with him is still going to be the shooting. Obviously, that's the biggest question, is whether or not his three-point shooting is going to be able to come along, given the fact that in the first 2 years of his career, he's been a sub-bar three-point shooter at best. Now, Tyus Jones significantly makes up for that and allows there to be real floor spacing on the floor on that bench unit. But Anthony Black's inability to shoot at a high clip, if that trend continues, is always going to be a certain limitation that hurts him in terms of him being able to get consistent minutes on the floor. Let's take a look at somebody on the opposite end of the spectrum, being Jace Richardson, someone that I've been a big proponent of a lot this offseason as a guy that I think his three-point shooting element is huge for a bench unit. What he provides next to Tyus Jones, besides a on-ball primary ball handler that can create for himself and shoot the three ball at a high enough clip, is also another guy that in transition is a threat on the wing, as a guy you have to worry about spraying from the corners, spraying from the top of the key. Also, I think Jace Richardson's ability to put the ball on the floor is something that, although I don't think he's quote unquote as polished as Anthony Black with the ball in his hands, I think he's more creative in being able to generate offense on ball with the ball in his hands, if that makes any sense. What I mean is, in a half court setting more particularly, because I think they both thrive relatively well in transition in their own way. I think Jace Richardson's ability to spread the floor makes him a threat in transition, the same way that Anthony Black's ability to put pressure on the rim makes him such a danger in the open floor. The separator is that I think Jace Richardson has a bigger bag, and I hate to say that because I hate using that phrasing to describe the talent discrepancies between guys as their dribble package, but I do think that his bag work, so to speak, in the half court can be very effective next to a guy like Tyus Jones because they're both really high level decision makers. I don't think Jace Richardson is a elite passer, but I think he's an above average passer, very similar to Anthony Black. But the threat of him being a knockdown shooter gives him a gravity that Anthony Black doesn't. With Anthony Black, you can collapse on the paint. You can sag off of him when he's at the top of the key and dare him to shoot. With Jace Richardson, you can't be nearly as frugal with your defensive responsibilities. You have to be at least respected, or you have to at least respect him as a knockdown three-point shooter. He's shown through the preseason that not only is he willing to take those three-point shots, but he has decent range to make him a threat, not necessarily right after he crosses half court, but a couple steps in, you got to at least respect the capability of him being able to knock down a three-point shot from distance. That's the biggest separator for Jace Richardson. So although the versatility of Anthony Black as a two-way player it fits pretty much like the best puzzle piece humanly possible next to Tyus Jones, the offensive threat that Jace Richardson provides as a three-point shooter and on-ball creator gives the Orlando Magic bench a completely different identity than what we've seen in years past, especially when you factor in the Tyus Jones element as well. There's this more balanced offensive unit with those two guys in the lineup. Now, I think there's a world where the second unit actually features both of them. Again, I've said this in the past that I believe that when you look at the fact that Anthony Black is 6'9", there's a world, and I think especially with the early goings of a potential slow start for Jalen Suggs, and paired with the fact that there's no Mo Wagner, so the center rotation really is Wendell Carter Jr. and mainly Goga Batadze, because as we mentioned beforehand, Jonathan Isaac kind of is on a pitch count. There's going to be experimentations on that second unit where they're going to have to go small ball. I would not be surprised if there's a second unit if you're running out a full John Calipari platoon switch, right, where the entire second unit plays for a stretch of time, that it looks like Tyus Jones at the 1, Jace Richardson at the 2 as a traditional 2 guard, Anthony Black as the 3, Tristan Da Silva as your small ball 4, and then somebody like Goga Batadze as your backup 5. That doesn't surprise me. I think that entire lineup has real versatility across the board because I think that Tyus Jones, albeit is not a all-world defender, I would say he's a neutral defender at best. Maybe a negative defender to a certain degree, but a neutral defender at best. Jace Richardson, I would say same thing. Very competitive as his size. Neutral defender at best. Maybe a negative defender, but you have 2+ defenders on the court to circumvent that in Anthony Black and also Tristan Da Silva. Then you have Goga Batadze, who can actively be not only a floor spacer for you, but he plays with high energy and high effort on both sides of the floor. Not an elite defender either, but neutral defender at best, right? So you have 3 neutral defenders on the court at all times, with the interchangeability of guys like Anthony Black, Tristan Da Silva, and Noah Pinda, all being guys who have the positional size and athletic capabilities to be high-level defensive players to make up for the fact that you have 2 basically defensive liabilities in the backcourt at that time. What you make up for in defensive liabilities from those two, you get good decision making from Tyus Jones and Jace Richardson. You get high level passing ability, and of course, you get the 3 point shooting acumen, which is the whole point of going after those two in the first place. Is that statistically they both are 38 plus 3 point shooters, both off the catch, and more particularly Jace Richardson off the dribble is about 37% from beyond the arc, at least at Michigan State, which shows that he has, decent sample size to be a high level shooter off the catch. I mean, off the catch and off the bounce. Tyus Jones, on the other hand, more of an off the catch guy, but as a pull up shooter was also a 39% pull up shooter in his best years with the Memphis Grizzlies. If he can maintain that, that consistency, now you have two knockdown threats, two up and down perimeter defenders that can scale between guarding the 1 through 4 to a lesser degree, and then you have Goga Batadze, who can be a high energy power forward slash center that's a good rebounder for his positional size, and a guy who can operate really well in transition as a guy who runs the floor, good play finisher, and it showed throughout this summer, especially in Eurobasket, that he is capable of shooting the three ball as well. So if I had to go with anybody in particular to start at the shooting guard position, if we're going with a traditional 5-man, setup that's not the small ball version, I think that Anthony Black is the best fit next to Tyus Jones on the second unit, and I think that Jace Richardson will get pot shot minutes here and there, with Tyus Jones, and maybe even likely next to Anthony Black, where they place Jace Richardson as the point guard in those lineups. But I think the most effective use of these two guys actually is to play them together and realize that the positional versatility Anthony Black has at his size gives him more flexibility to still be put on the floor, even if he does not play his dominant position, which is, of course, point guard slash shooting guard. So there's a case for both guys, and I think both cases are strong. The best case scenario, I think, and the most effective lineup, I think, when it comes to these two guys, actually, I think will be shown where they both play together, paired with Tyus Jones as well, has the capability of being the best of both worlds, where offensively they are significantly versatile, in terms of what their shot selection can create with the athleticism pairing with the 3 point shooting that they have in the backcourt, along with defensively always having at least two stud defenders on the court at all times, whether it's Anthony Black and Tristan da Silva, whether it's Anthony Black and Jalen Suggs, and to a lesser degree Desmond Bane, Anthony Black and Franz Wagner. Like, there's always some combination of two high-level defenders on the court at all times, and then maintaining that 3 point shooting acumen that they so desperately have been trying to build all summer. Last but not least, we're going to stick with that shooting guard position because an interesting wild card, and again, I don't know how many minutes he would get on this team. I don't even necessarily know where he definitively fits on this roster. But Victor Oladipo has just been really solid. He's been really solid in this preseason, and I want to, let me see if I can bring up the stats that I found, and if I can't, that's totally fine, but Victor Oladipo is a guy that I think is a really interesting player for any roster this upcoming season. And what he's been able to do in the preseason, playing with I believe they're called the Luong Lions from the Chinese Basketball Association, it's been a really good opportunity to see him play well. If he doesn't land on the Orlando Magic, I think he deserves to be on a roster in some capacity. I'll read this off from an article from Sports Illustrated that says, Guangzhou, the Luong Lions, recently played an exhibition game against the LA Clippers on October 9th. In the 142-95 Clippers blowout victory, Oladipo scored a team-high 24 points on 8 of 12 shooting from the field, 2 of 4 from deep, and 6 of 7 shooting from the foul line, dishing out 5 dimes, swiped 2 steals, and blocked a shot. Fellow former Pacers guard Justin Holiday and ex-NBA journeyman big Frank Kaminsky are also on the team. This is a Indiana Pacers-centered article, but I think it just got all of the things that I felt were necessary in relation to what I think Oladipo has done so far during the preseason. Oladipo appears to be open to playing in Europe too, although his preference remains breaking back into the NBA. He has also worked for ESPN as an analyst in recent years. If push comes to shove and that's the last option, we'll see. I'm definitely one of the best, so that where I belong in the three letters NBA. He laughed. Victor Oladipo, as a guy that I think at his size, 6'4", 6'5", still I think an above average athlete, even at age 33, coming off the significant injuries, has shown, and you gotta cut on the tape. The preseason has showed that he's still aggressive in shot hunting. He again in this game against the LA Clippers got to the free throw line 7 times, so he still is good at being able to create contact and finish through contact and get to the free throw line at a decently high clip. A guy who is an improved three-point shooter, and in his time post Orlando Magic developed more and more as a three-point shooter in his time with Indiana, and more particularly in that short stint with the Miami Heat. This is a guy who puts, I think, even in his advanced age, and I say that like lightly, given the fact that 33 for him is only feels so much older because of the fact that he has the injury history. He still has the ability to put the pressure on the rim. He still, I think, has the capability of being an above average slasher at the wing as a dude that you have to worry about on backdoor cuts to just, win backdoor cut opportunities and finish around the basket. I'm not saying he's Zach LaVine as a backdoor slasher, but can he be a guy who can can be a play finisher on 3 or 4 designed backdoor cuts where he creates mismatch opportunities where he cuts to the basket on the baseline and now goes up against a big where he has to create a one-on-one opportunity where the big has to either foul him quickly and send him to the free throw line or risk getting finesse layup on or even postered on, because I think Victor Oladipo still has the capability of giving guys a run for their money around the basket as a play finisher. Yes, I think those are all things that he has the capability of doing. Does he have to come in and be a play initiator, right? Does he need to be the Victor Oladipo of Indiana old, where you're drawing up plays for him to go head hunt shots? No. But I think we've talked about this all summer, the concept of him or any of the players that we've discussed, the Malik Monks, like I mentioned, Victor Oladipo, the Russell Westbrooks of the world, of these like cheap signings, to be like just go out and hoop. Just go out and be this microwave scorer. Be unlike guys who like Jace Richardson, who your role is definitively to be another knockdown three-point shooter and high level decision maker at the point guard spot. Unlike Anthony Black, who you look at his positional versatility and you say he can be a guy that scales between guarding 1 through 3 at his size defensively. There's different roles you can carve out for them where they fit particularly within an archetype. The archetype that guys like Victor Oladipo would step into for a team like the Orlando Magic is very simple. Your six-man Lou Will, high volume, scoring, shooting guard. Is that a high commodity in today's NBA? It's definitely not what it used to. We've seen the money that Cam Thomas was able to command in this economy with that play style. We saw the trade value or lack thereof for a guy in Colin Sexton when he was moved from the Utah Jazz to the Charlotte Hornets this summer. The value around the position itself is not what it used to be. But when you're able to get him on a relatively cheap discount with what the Orlando Magic are sitting at right now, that value becomes much better. If you can get, for example, Cam Thomas on the qualifying offer at anywhere between 8 to 11, 12 million is very calm for that positional role. You're just not going to pay 25, $30 million for it. The Orlando Magic are right up against I believe they're about anywhere between $1 million to $5 million under the first apron. In order to stay under the first apron, they would have to move off of somebody in order to create flexible cap space. Otherwise, if this Orlando Magic team viewed a guy like Victor Oladipo as a cherry on top piece for this roster, you could go into the first apron and sign him on I believe because Victor Oladipo has too much of a veteranship in the league. I think he has too many years as an NBA pro, so you can't give him like uh I think it's like a $4 to $6 million veteran minimum. I think he actually requires closer to like the 8 to 10 range, which again I think is fair for his positional role. You could go into the first apron and be kind of punching up against the second apron for someone like Victor Oladipo. Is it worth it? That depends. That depends on if you're able to carve out real minutes for him. I think with the more pace and space aspect of what the Orlando Magic are pushing for, that Victor Oladipo matches that energy in a way that makes it worth it. On the other end, the first apron is a tricky thing to maneuver out of, especially when guys like Jonathan Isaac can't have picks attached to them because the Orlando Magic don't really have picks to attach to him. The backup shooting guard position, nonetheless, I feel like is going to be one of the most interesting questions for the Orlando Magic the entire season, because I feel like a million different guys can fit there that are already on this roster, whether that's Anthony Black, Jace Richardson. I think there's a world where maybe Jet Howard does get a shot before the trade deadline to fight for those minutes. And I also think that having some kind of real microwave score archetype guy is still in the cards for this team. It's one of the most interesting spots outside of the backup five position, which I think is still the most important thing that needs to be addressed, in my personal opinion, because even though I love Goga Batadze, I feel like the rebounding aspect of the Orlando Magic is just something that if you can add just one more high-level rebounder, Andre Drummond type, not the version of Andre Drummond right now because he's slowly but surely starting to fall off a cliff, but an Andre Drummond type as a rebounder, that would be the thing that kind of puts this team over the top at the center spot. But that backup shooting guard position is one that if you can get one guy on this roster, and he doesn't even necessarily need to play shooting guard, by the way, but if you can get one guy on this roster that's your go get a bucket guy, that gives the Orlando Magic an element that they have not had in quite some time. And more particularly, it gives you a guy that if someone like Paulo Banchero or Franz Wagner, or the combination of the two, because we've seen it happen literally last year, goes down, you still have a guy that you can call a quote-unquote trusted scorer. Right now, that seems like Desmond Bane in the starting lineup, but there's no depth to that. So it's a question mark that the Orlando Magic have and are going to remain, and is probably going to remain until a significant move is made. So you guys let me know down in the comment section down below. What do you believe is the hierarchical solution to the backup shooting guard position? Anthony Black, Jace Richardson, in a far distant third, someone like Jet Howard? Is there a guy that's not already on the team that could be an interesting solution to that backup shooting guard position in its own right, like a Victor Oladipo? You guys let me know in the comment section down below. But this has been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. Again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I will have more information on the team for you guys tomorrow and more insight on what I think is going to be an interesting roster going into the start of the regular season. But until I see you guys then, peace.